Part 2. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 11. Ah! The old man was caught off guard by the cinnabar being sprinkled on his face, and his eyes instantly felt burning. He instinctively covered his eyes immediately. At this time, the broken knife in Su Tong's hand had penetrated deeply into the old man's abdomen, and the broken blade penetrated into the handle of the knife. He expected that Fatty Li was unreliable and would definitely call him out at critical moments, and Fatty's habit of calling him Brother Su during this period was also very instructive. The lighting in the room was too poor, and the conditions for hiding at will were not available. In such a big place, there was a precedent for Li Bo to play the role of a paper man. If I were an old man, the first thing I would think of is either the groom or another paper man. So he hid in an unexpected place for the old man. He twisted his hands and said, "Ft." Immediately, blood poured down the old man's lower abdomen. The old man's lips trembled, and he suppressed the discomfort in his eyes before punching him with his backhand. However, this punch was in vain. Su Tong bent down, opened his hands and threw himself into the old man's arms, knocking the old man out of the door. "Screw you." After the old man rolled on the ground, he used a rabbit and an eagle to kick Su Tong away. "What is this?" "Cinnabar." He resisted the burning pain in his eyes and opened his eyelids to take a closer look. His eyebrows twitched, and then he looked at Su Tong, who had climbed up from the ground, and the fat man who came out of the room. The corner of his mouth slowly raised a sinister smile. "Shandaya's eye over there, is it a shiny black-skinned horse, or a pair of shoe handles on the road?" Li Bo was startled when he heard this and looked at Su Bo with a confused expression. "Brother Su, what does this old guy mean?" He shook his head. "It should be slang." Seeing that the two of them didn't talk to each other, the old man smiled even more ferociously. "It turns out that they are two raw melon eggs, and they dare to smash your master Li's mountain gate. Go to your uncle and return to Shanmen Pass. I have only heard of Shanhaiguan. You know what you are doing and get down on your own. Grandpa won't care about you." Li Bo was scolding fiercely, but in his heart he was very weak. There was a burning pain in his chest. The old man had just whipped him down, leaving his skin and flesh torn. Just standing there seemed reluctant. If the old man hadn't been sprinkled with cinnabar and stabbed severely by Su Tong, he would have been tempted to run away through the door. "By you." The old man put his hand on his waist and touched it. The smile on his face suddenly solidified. He lowered his head and looked at the bell that was originally hanging on his waist. He didn't know when it disappeared. Jingle bell. With the ringing of the bell, the old man looked up and saw that his bell was being held by Su Tong. "This is what you are looking for, right?" He looked at the bell. He didn't know what era it was from. It was easy to see many small scratches on it. It was engraved with a whole picture of purgatory, which looked terrifying in the moonlight. "Do not move." When the old man saw that the bell actually fell into Su Tong's hand, he hurriedly said, "Little brother, don't mess around, give me the bell, and pretend that tonight's incident never happened. I will give you another box of gold bars. You can go. Believe me, you old ghost. You have a box of gold bars, how can you stay here?" Li Bo curled his lips with a look of disbelief on his face. Hearing this, the old man made no excuses. He held his injured lower abdomen and walked to the chicken coop. He pushed the chicken coop up and pulled out a small wooden box full of chicken manure from below. He threw it casually in front of the two of them. Boom! The box fell into pieces when it hit the ground, and gold bars rolled out from inside. "No matter what kind of gods you are, there is no deep hatred between us. This money is enough for you to live happily for a lifetime. Just take the money and leave." Looking at the bright gold bars, Li Bo couldn't help but froze for a moment. He picked up one and put it to his mouth and took a bite. After confirming that it was not chocolate or paper balls, Li Bo's breathing suddenly became rapid. If you were to give a number, Li Bo might not think it was a big deal, but what he saw in front of him was real gold bars. One stick weighs at least 1 kilogram. If you take it back, it will cost more than 100,000 yuan. After a rough calculation, he was shocked. If he took back this box of gold, he would probably not have to worry about food and drink for the rest of his life. It would be a lie to say that he was not moved, but he glanced sideways at Su Tong and saw that he didn't even look at the gold, and swallowed the words that came to his mouth. Li Bo silently stuffed the gold bars into his pocket, looked at the old man and asked, "You care so much about this bell, what's the use of it? You don't understand even after I tell you. Just take the money and leave immediately." The old man didn't have the patience to explain to them. He looked at the bell in Su Tong's hand and urged them to hand it over immediately. Su Tong glanced sideways at the old man, then looked at the bell in his hand, his eyes narrowed and said, "Okay, I'll give it back to you." As he spoke, he waved his hand and threw the bell out. "Don't want." Seeing Su Tong's actions, a black shadow finally couldn't help but rush out from the darkness, grabbed the bell in front of the old man, and grabbed it. "Zhou Nan." Looking at the figure that jumped out, the old man stared at him with a look of disbelief. All the confusion in the old man's heart was immediately solved. His patron wife was torn and her body was sprinkled with cinnabar. He couldn't figure out how he could do this with just 2 raw melon eggs. Now he understands. Seeing Zhou Nan getting the bell, the old man sat down on the ground. His already old face suddenly became much older. "You finally couldn't help it anymore." "I can't help it." Zhou Nan was stunned, then slowly turned around to look at the old man. His face seemed to be smiling, then crying again. His facial features were distorted. "You left me here for 38 years. You made me a human being and a ghost for so many years. You owe me this. This is what you owe me." Zhou Nan became more and more excited as he spoke, and his expression even became crazy. "If it weren't for you, my mother wouldn't have died. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have ended up where I am today. 38 years have passed, and I've had enough. I don't want to stay in this damn place for another quarter of an hour." He pointed at the old man, stamped his feet, waved his arms and screamed, as if he wanted to shout out all the words he had suppressed in his heart for so many years. "This guy is crazy." Li Bo looked confused. He didn't know what happened to Zhou Nan suddenly. As he spoke, he turned to look at Su Tong, wanting to hear what this guy's attitude was. As a result, when I turned around, I saw that Su Tong had found a small bench out of nowhere, with a handful of peanuts in his hand and a look of great interest on his face. Li Bo. Perhaps because he was a little embarrassed to be stared at by Li Bo's strange eyes, Su Tong stood up helplessly, walked to him, and silently grabbed a handful of melon seeds from his pocket. Looking at the melon seeds being stuffed into his hand, Li Bo was stunned. "Where did you get the melon seeds?" "The new wife's clothes are stuffed, so let's make do with it." Su Tong casually took out another red date and put it in his mouth, but his eyes never left Zhou Nan. He watched him venting his emotions out of control, but instead watched his every move seriously, as if just like the 3 good students in the classroom. Li Bo was stunned for a long time before he finally realized that this was not about Guozi, no, I mean, Weivue. As soon as he opened his mouth, Su Tong stuffed a handful of peanuts into his mouth. "Don't talk, just watch." Li Bo chewed a few times in his mouth with a grimace. Suddenly his teeth hurt, as if he had bitten something hard and broken. When he was about to open his mouth and spit it out, he suddenly heard Su Tong's voice beside him, "Hold it in your mouth." Not knowing what it was, Li Bo didn't dare to spit it out, so he could only keep it in his mouth. By this time, Zhou Nan's mood had gradually stabilized. Looking at the bitter old man, he finally couldn't bear to talk anymore. With a long sigh, he rubbed his face with his hands, tried his best to put on a smiling face, turned around, and looked at Su Tong and Li Bo. When he saw it, he saw that both of them had eaten. Zhou Nan was stunned for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure and continued, "Anyway, thank you, please do me one more favor." Zhou Nan. The old man raised his head, his red and swollen eyes already full of tears. "Zhou Nan, you can't get out, tomorrow is July 15th, give these wandering souls to those ghost kings, and you can be reincarnated." He wanted to stand up, but Su Tong's knife had penetrated deeply and the blood could not stop flowing out. He still had strength just now, but now he could not even stand up and could only pat himself hard. Thai said, "Dad will not harm you, Dad will not harm you. How can there be a father in this world who would harm his son? Dad? Not uncle." Li Bo unconsciously cracked the melon seeds, but the more he looked at them, the more confused he became. If you look at the dishes and chopsticks in the kitchen, you should know that they are not just uncles and nephews. Su Tong pointed to the kitchen. When he entered the hospital, he noticed that the dishes and chopsticks in the kitchen were all large and small. There were chicken coops, water tanks, and rice noodles. Obviously, the old man lived in here. But he is only one person, so why he needs two pairs of bowls and chopsticks? It shows that someone is living with him, even if this person is not a living person. Zhou Nan looked at the fire rising again at the end of the village and shook his head. "Dad, do you really believe in the so-called Ghost King?" "I don't believe it. You have paid tribute to him so many wandering ghosts over the years. If he was really capable, he would have promised you long ago. I don't believe him. I want to fight for myself." "Fight?" When the old man noticed the fire, his expression suddenly changed. When he looked back, he saw that the fire that had been extinguished in the village had ignited again, and this time it was not burning in one place, but everywhere. "How?" In surprise, he saw a pig running quickly from the village with a torch in its mouth. He recognized the pig at a glance. Wasn't it the Zhonghao whose soul he had evoked? Seeing that everything he had worked so hard over the years was about to be burned down by a fire, the old man's eyes turned red. "You are looking for death." He pointed at Su Tong angrily, "Do you think he will let you go? No one can hide it from anyone, so how can he hide it from others? You will all die." As he spoke, he pointed to the pig on the ground and said, "Same for you." Zhang Hao's limbs stiffened and he looked at Zhou Nan blankly as if struck by lightning. Seeing that his father had revealed his idea and Zhou Nan had no intention of hiding it, he clapped his hands. There was a rustle in the room, and a naked paper man walked out, his body stiff, as if he might fall down with every step he took. "Isn't this the paper man possessed by Zhou Yu? I want to use the ghost marriage to clear the way and send me away from here. You can help me again and help me again." Zhou Nan looked at Su Tong, who was sitting there peeling peanuts and looked unmoved. He couldn't help frowning and raising the bell on his hand. "Don't blame me. I will apologize to you again when we get to the underworld." As he spoke, he shook the bell in his hand vigorously, but after shaking it twice, the bell did not ring. Huh! In confusion, he picked up the bell and took a look, only to see that the spring inside the bell was gone. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 12. Where's Dang Huang? Zhou Nan looked at the empty bell, as if he understood something, and looked at Su Tong who was sitting there peeling peanuts with a cold face. "It turns out you have been plotting against me for a long time. I'll give you 0 points for your performance." Faced with Zhou Nan's questioning, he shook his head, threw away the peanut shells on his hands, and gestured, "Be natural and find your emotions. What you did just now was very good. I like it. Next time you play the victim, you must be more natural when your emotions are aroused. Yes, it's your current expression, even more ferocious." Looking at Zhou Nan who was already on the verge of going berserk, Li Bo couldn't help but vomit. After hearing Su Tong's words again, He almost couldn't help but complain, "What time has it been? Are you running to be a judge?" Of course, he only dared to say this in his heart, but he didn't have the courage to say it out loud. Catch him. Zhou Nan has run out of patience. It's almost dawn. If he doesn't take action today, he will be in trouble if he tries to hide the truth tomorrow night. Although the Ghost Gate is closed on July 15th, theoretically it is the best time to enter the underworld, but if the Ghost King discovers that he has stolen his tribute, he will not be able to escape. The only way to survive now is to give yourself a try. As Zhou Nan finished speaking, Zhou Yu's body began to rustle, and the stiff joints twisted and made harsh tearing sounds. 2 iron hooks appeared in her hands. When he raised his head, 2 traces of blood slid down his gray face. "Girls, look at how powerful your grandpa is." Looking at Zhou Yu walking out, Li Bo raised the paper stick in his hand and smashed it, wanting to take advantage of the opportunity to strike first. However, what he didn't expect was that the paper stick he used with all his strength stopped abruptly less than 3 centimeters above Zhou Yu's head. What's going on? He was shocked and didn't understand what was going on. A strong wind came down in front of him, and he saw Zhou Yu kicking the sky hard in the belly. The huge force caused Li Bo to fly backwards and fall 7 or 8 meters away. After kicking Li Bo away, Zhou Yu turned his eyes, held 2 iron hooks in his hands and rushed towards Su Tong. It's obviously just a paper man, but its speed is surprisingly fast. Su Tong raised his eyebrows and looked at the iron hook that had been chopped down. He reluctantly raised the broken knife in his hand to block it. Hearing a bang, the broken knife was knocked away from his hand. The huge force made his arms numb. When he saw Zhou Yu smashing the iron hook at him, he didn't care about the broken knife in his hand and jumped up quickly, but the speed was still much slower, and he was still hit by the iron hook in his lower ribs. Superior. There was a severe pain in my lower ribs, and I knew the ribs were broken without even looking. Boom. His body fell hard to the ground, but Su Tong did not check his injuries immediately, but got up and ran. Seeing Su Tong running for his life in embarrassment, Zhou Nan couldn't help but imitate a living person and take a deep breath. He had long had enough of this guy's self-righteousness. It was a joy for him to see him running for his life while being chased by a paper man. Glancing around, just as he saw Li Bo trying to get up, Zhou Nan's face turned cold and he slowly raised his hand towards Li Bo. Li Bo was already injured, and after receiving this bad treatment, his whole body felt bad. When he stood up, he felt like there was something stuck in his throat, and he couldn't even breathe. Just at this moment, Li Bo's left hand suddenly became uncontrollable and he grabbed his throat. This palm that was detached from the backer woman completely deviated from the scientific principles he was familiar with and actually lifted him from the ground into the air. Li Bo's entire face turned red for a moment. He was already out of breath, and now he couldn't even breathe at all. "Stop struggling, give me the bell, and I can help you walk more comfortably." Zhou Nan walked up to the fat man and looked at Su Tong. He saw him jumping up and down around the yard with Zhou Yu chasing him, with indescribable joy on his face. Boom! Seeing the iron hook flying towards him, Su Tong ducked sideways, and the iron hook grazed his face and smashed the wooden stake used to tie the mule behind him to pieces. Su Tong paused, turned around and asked, "For example?" "For example?" Zhou Nan was stunned when he asked this question. "You are being polite, but do you still take it seriously?" However, he soon realized that Su Tong was playing tricks on him, and his cold face suddenly became more sinister. "If you don't hand over Dang Huang, you might as well see how your friend died first." As he spoke, he stretched out his palm and slapped the fat man on the belly. The seemingly light grasp actually penetrated Li Bo's belly. Suddenly the fat man felt that his internal organs were being mixed together, and the pain made his eyes go black. But Su Tong didn't even look at it. After rolling on the ground, his body was forced to the corner. He saw Joyu rushing over with an iron hook. He glanced at the firewood pile beside him, gritted his teeth, quickly jumped up and stepped on the firewood pile to the kitchen roof, and then narrowly avoided Joyu's iron hook. But before he could take a breath, Joyu lightly tapped his feet and jumped onto the roof. Ha ha ha, run, let's see where you go this time. Seeing that he had nowhere to run, Zhou couldn't help laughing wantonly. While laughing, he didn't forget to look back at Old Man Li. How about it? Is my paper control skill better than my previous one? Old Man Li grimaced, opened his mouth but could not utter a single word. The fire in the village behind him was getting bigger and bigger. He knew that the end was done and it was useless to say anything now. Just when Zhou was smiling even more proudly, he suddenly heard Li Bo's hoarse voice, "Trash, rubbish." Zhou was startled and tilted his head to look at Li Bo. "What did you say?" This guy's face turned from red to purple, but he was still able to speak. Li Bo's legs were hanging in the air, struggling more intensely, but he still didn't forget to silently extend a middle finger to Zhou. Zhou didn't know what the small gesture meant, but the contemptuous look in Fatty's eyes made him feel angry. He raised his hand, aimed at this guy's belly, and punched him again. The heavy punch instantly made Li Bo's eyes widen, but what Zhou never expected was that Li Bo suddenly opened his mouth. Vomit. Blood mixed with saliva and pieces of broken stone sprayed directly on his body. Zi. For a moment, Zhou whole body seemed to have been poured with a basin of boiling water, and white smoke was rising. Ah! He screamed and fell to the ground. He never dreamed that Li Bo's bite would actually make him miserable. After waving his hand to order Li Bo to throw it out, he covered his face with his hands and rolled back and forth on the ground. Cinnabar. Old Man Li could tell at a glance what the problem was. Seeing his son fall to the ground, he struggled to get up, and then fell to the ground again due to lack of strength. He used his hands to support himself and crawled towards Zhou, trying to make his son hold on. But Zhou used all his strength and pointed at Su Tong, "Kill him." After saying this, he couldn't support his body and fell unconscious on the ground. After receiving the order, Zhou struck again, more sharply than before. With a gentle tap of his foot, he circled behind Su Tong. Not giving Su Tong the slightest chance, he hooked his hand and inserted the sharp iron hook straight into his shoulder, lifting him up directly. He could even hear the cracking of his own bones under the bone-crushing pain. Is this how I'm going to die? In an instant, the scene he saw in the stills flashed through Su Tong's mind. He was suspended high by two iron ropes, with blood dripping down his feet. Lo exploded. Ignoring the torn hole in his shoulder, he hugged Joyu's waist and stamped his feet fiercely. The tiles that had already cracked suddenly could no longer withstand Su Tong's trampling. Plop. With the sound of broken mud and tiles under their feet, the two people's eyes were instantly covered with cold water. It turned out that under their feet was the large water tank used for cooking. This water tank should have been in the corner, but now it appears in the center of the kitchen. This is naturally Su Tong's masterpiece. After seeing Li Bo's stills before, he concluded in his heart that these stills must have some kind of predictive ability and told them the ending in advance. It's just that this kind of prediction is not inevitable. Just like the fat man's hand was caught by a zombie, if he didn't save him, his end might really be like the one in the stills. But the fact that they are still alive shows that they have the possibility to change this ending. So he thought about many possibilities. Although there were deviations from what he expected, one thing was unmistakable. Whether it was Old Man Li or Zhou, they were not very strong. What was really scary were these paper figures. It is hard to imagine that these paper figures made of paper pulp and layers of white paper are actually invulnerable and powerful human weapons. But no matter how strong they can't change their nature of paper. This water tank is the biggest trump card he has left. Sure enough, Joyu's body collapsed instantly after being soaked in the water. His arms, which were originally as strong as a rock, could no longer bear the weight of the iron hook and were torn apart. Zhou was still struggling, but the harder he struggled, the faster his body fell apart. His body stained with water became heavy and soft, and in the blink of an eye, a layer of white shredded paper floated in the water tank. The water splashed, and the originally slender and shapely neck tilted, causing half of Zhou's head to be submerged in the water, but she still maintained a smiling expression on her face. As Zhou Nan said before, no matter how painful these paper figures are, they can only remain this way. Come on, just stay here and soak. Su Tong had no intention of taking a mandarin duck bath with her again, so he climbed out of the water tank with great pain from the wound on his shoulder. When he pushed open the kitchen door, he saw Zhou Nan lying on the ground, with holes one after another burned out of his body by cinnabar. He was wailing in pain, and a faint blue light kept escaping from his body. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 13. Zhou Nan. The old man rushed forward and wanted to pick up his son, but when he saw the cinnabar on his hand, his half-stretched hand froze in mid-air. It's over, it's all over. The sea of fire surged in the distance, illuminating half of the sky. The villagers turned into torches one by one in the sea of fire, and the old man's face turned gray. The tributes were gone, and the soul that Zhou Nan had finally gathered was about to disperse again. All his years of hard work were in vain. Damn, you deserve it, ahem, this is all your retribution. Li Bo stumbled over. His face was sallow and his bloodshot eyes stared at the father and son on the ground. He wished he could pick up the bricks and slap these two bastards to death right now. Even Zhang Hao on the side could not wait to pounce on them and take a few bites of them. Retribution. The old man raised his head numbly and stared at Li Bo sideways. What do you think is retribution? You. Li Bo felt hairy all over at the old man's fierce eyes, but he still said forcefully, you built this ghost village and killed so many people. It is retribution for you to end up like this. Hearing this, the old man's eyes were blank. He looked at the huge fire behind him and suddenly laughed in a daze. Ha ha ha, so this is the retribution you said. As he spoke, the old man suddenly raised his head. 38 years ago, our village encountered an insect plague that had not been seen for 100 years, and the food harvest was cut off. The people in the village fled for their lives, died of hunger and thirst, and all the livestock died. I spent 5 the ghost transportation technique stole food from the county for them. His eyes were shining brightly, as if he had returned to that day when he secretly handed food to the villagers. That day, everyone smiled on their faces, white rice was sprinkled in the bucket, and everyone's face glowed with hope. However, the old man suddenly changed his words and his voice became thin and sinister. What happened? Within 3 months, people from the county suddenly came. Without saying a word, they arrested me and tortured me severely. I was imprisoned. For 3 months, I was tortured to the point of being covered in wounds. Tell me, is this also retribution? This. Li Bo was stunned by the question, but still said stubbornly, it's always wrong to steal things. The old man was not angry, but nodded calmly, yes, stealing is always wrong. I was beaten half to death in prison, and finally got the chance to escape. But when I returned to the village, you know what the result was? What? My wife died. I opened the door and my wife was lying on the bed. She was already smelly. There were dense flies crawling on her face. She was starving to death. No one in the village was willing to give them a bite to eat. I hurried to find my son, and found him in the well. He was soaked to death and couldn't be fished out. He died miserably. He was a ghost who died violently. I wanted to save him, but I couldn't even save his soul. Can't find all. I don't blame the people in the village. I went from house to house begging for hundreds of rice and hundreds of cloths. I just asked them to give my son a little kindness so that my son could be saved. Result: I can't even knock on a door. There was no trace of sadness or anger on the old man's face. His face was full of regret. He looked at Libo and asked, "Do you think this is retribution?" Libo's chest gasped, and he could no longer speak this time. Su Tong picked up the bell on the ground and took out the bell spring that he had removed from his pocket. In fact, this thing is easy to disassemble and easy to put on. There is an iron buckle inside, just click it in. He walked up to the old man and handed the bell over. "If we help you, can you save him?" "What? Brother Su, what are you doing to save them?" Libo's expression changed drastically and he was going crazy. He knew that Su Tong was a lunatic, but why was he so crazy at this time? "No way, who asked me to be a doctor?" Su Tong rubbed his shoulders and sighed helplessly. "Help me." The old man looked at Su Tong suspiciously. He didn't believe that Su Tong would be so kind. After all, his son almost killed them just now. "Yes. Help you." He nodded seriously and put the bell in the old man's hand, "but the prerequisite is that you first free these wandering souls who are imprisoned by you." Libo listened and suddenly realized, thinking, yes, their mission is not to eliminate violence and bring peace to the people, but to free all souls. How could I have forgotten this? Seeing that the old man was still hesitating, Su Tong patted his shoulder, sat next to the old man and said, "I lost my parents when I was very young. I was locked in a small cage. There was an old man next to the cage. Every morning he woke up. Every time he comes, he becomes a different person. Sometimes he is a man, sometimes he is a woman, but he will say one thing to me every day: only with hope can there be a future." He looked back at the old man. "Believe me, this will definitely not be your retribution." Hearing that the old man's nerves seemed to be touched by something, he looked at the bell in his hand and then at his son who was about to lose his mind. He gritted his teeth and said, "Okay, I'll bet again." The old man took a deep breath. At this point, he could only take risks. "If you want to liberate these ghosts, just take this bell to the dead tree in the northwest corner and shake it 3 times, and they will be freed." The old man pointed to the woods at the end of the village and said. This matter was naturally left to Libo. Although Libo was injured, when he heard the news that the task could be completed, he naturally would not refuse. He was eager to complete the task and leave early. "Brother Su, I'm going to go then, you." Libo said, holding the bell, but there was actually something he didn't say. Su Tong knew what Libo wanted to say, so he just waved his hand, "Then go ahead." Seeing that he was not going to follow him, Libo said nothing and walked out without looking back. Just as he was about to walk out of the yard, the old man suddenly called him, "Bring a fire. There are their clothes in the tree hole. Remember to burn those clothes." "Oh. Libo was stunned for a moment and nodded to show that he remembered. After Libo left, the old man asked him to take down an oil lamp from the beam in the kitchen. Then he was asked to take out the boxes filled with paper ingots from the house and scatter them all on the ground. That's all. Su Tong tore open the old man's clothes and simply found some gauze to help him bandage the wound first. His knife did not hurt the vital part, but if the bleeding was not stopped early, the old man might not be able to last long. "You took that book, right?" While the bandaging was taking place, the old man suddenly asked. "Yes, here." He didn't deny it, took the book out of his arms and showed it to the old man. The old man didn't mean to beg for it, he just said, "This book is passed down from generation to generation in the 8 sections. My master's surname is Wang, and it is passed down to 2 disciples. It's a pity that our lineage will be extinct. If you like it, you can do it yourself. Take it back and study it, which can be regarded as my reward for you." 8 gates. Su Tong's eyes widened, as if he had learned about an unknown world from the old man's mouth. 1 door scarf, 2 doors skin, 3 doors cai, 4 doors hanging, 5 doors flat, 6 doors tuan, 7 doors tune, 8 doors chat. These are the 8 doors. Our family lineage is the 7 doors. When we meet in the future as an expert, you can also have an explanation. The old man said a lot in one breath. For example, in addition to their 8 sects, there are also watchmen, matchmakers, etc. in the lower sections. Each of them has his or her own unknown side. When this matter is over, if you stay with us for a while, I will pass on what I have learned in my life to you, which can be regarded as an explanation to the master. When you go out, you can say that you are a descendant of the Wang surname. It will naturally save a lot of trouble. He didn't answer when he heard the words, and nodded with a naive smile on his face. Seeing the eagerness in his eyes, the old man relaxed a lot of his worries. While the two were talking, smoke was already rising in the woods at the edge of the village. At this time, a cold reminder sounded in their ears: Main Mission 2, Rescue has been completed. This scenario world task has been completed. Participants can choose to continue staying or return to reality. If you need to continue to stay, the maximum time shall not exceed 28 hours. If the stay time limit is reached, you will be forcibly returned to reality. At the same time as the prompt sounded, the piglet's eyes suddenly froze, and soon he lost consciousness and fell to the ground, turning into a paper pig again. Also disappearing at the same time was Zhang Hao's soulless body. But Zhou Yu and the college student Wang Shaowai were lying together forever. When he found that everyone was gone, Su Tong couldn't help but lick his lips. "Tch, I'm really impatient. Get ready, time is tight, let's not waste time." The old man rested for a while and regained his strength. When he looked at the smoke rising in the distance, he knew that Li Bo had burned the tree. As for his bell, if he lost it, he would lose it. Compared with his son, he didn't care about throwing away the treasure passed down by his ancestors. The old man walked to the pile of paper, lit the brazier, and at the same time picked up the oil lamp, walked to his son, and blew it gently. The wick of the oil lamp actually glowed with fluorescence, and Zhou Nan's body was sucked into the lamp. "Remember, no matter what you see later, don't panic, you must listen to me." As the old man spoke, he carefully placed the oil lamp on the ground and took out 2 pieces of yellow paper from his arms. He gently rubbed the yellow paper on his hand a few times and pinched it with his fingers, and he easily pinched out 2 pieces of yellow paper. "Here comes a little paper man." This skill made Su Tong standing aside secretly amazed. Boom. After getting ready, the old man knelt on the ground with his legs crossed, fingers crossed with his hands, and muttered. Bamang knocks lightly on the gate of ghosts, sitting down to make the underworld cross the 9 springs. His Majesty Yama, the 10 ghost kings, don't ask about bullheads and horse faces, don't bother civil and military judges, don't dare to ask Zhong Kui and Kui Yu, don't bother with silver hooks and iron ropes, just invite the 7th and 8th masters to come to my presence. Ask about impermanence, about impermanent things. As the words fell, a cool breeze came from nowhere and blew on their cheeks. This cool breeze was more biting than the cold wind, and it made people feel indescribably uncomfortable when it blew on their bodies. A large amount of cold sweat was falling from the old man's forehead and down his chin. He didn't know whether he had lost too much blood or there was another reason. Su Tong looked at his trembling hands and couldn't help but frown. At this time, he suddenly raised his eyebrows and stared straight at the 2 paper figures standing up slowly on the ground. "Quick, throw all the money in." Seeing the 2 paper figures standing up on the ground, the old man quickly asked Su Tong to throw all the paper ingots at hand into the brazier. While kowtowing to the 2 paper figures, he said, "Please be kind to the 7th and 8th masters and give my son a chance to survive." As he spoke, he kept kowtowing down. Every time he kowtowed, his head hit the stone on the ground with a banging sound. He kowtowed several times in a row, but the fire in the brazier became smaller and smaller. Su Tong took a closer look and found that the fire in the brazier could not ignite the paper ingot he dropped. Seeing this, the old man looked grim, and continued with a bitter look, "If the seventh master and the eighth master are willing to take pity on the little old man, the little old man will definitely be the two of you in the future. The incense will continue every day, and the table will be like a banquet every year." Unfortunately, no matter what he said, the two paper figures in front of him remained unmoved. Just when the old man felt desperate, Su Tong suddenly remembered something, took out two ghost notes from his arms and threw them into the brazier. "I just wanted to give it a try, but as soon as Ming Chao entered the brazier, it instantly burned to ashes with a boom." The two paper figures moved slightly. Although the movement was small, it gave the old man hope. Seeing this, Su Tong did not wait for the old man to speak, and continued to throw the money in his hand. He saw the fire in the brazier getting stronger and stronger, and the two paper figures finally slowly raised their hands and gently moved them forward. The oil lamp in front of me actually produced kerosene. A wisp of sparks flickered on the wick for a few times, and the abandoned oil lamp was actually lit. "Thank you to the seventh master, thank you to the eighth master. From now on, I will build a shrine for you two, worship them every day, and make offerings every year." The old man hurriedly kowtowed to express his thanks, carefully put the two paper figures into the brazier, watched the paper figures disappear in the brazier, and then let out a long breath. He whispered to Su Tong aside, "This is a last resort. It's easy to ask the gods but hard to send them away. If it hadn't been for the few precious notes you just threw in, today would probably be the anniversary of my father's death." As he spoke, he carefully held the oil lamp in his hand, with a smile on his face. Although all his previous efforts were in vain, his son was finally saved. If he had to start over again, he would definitely be able to find a way to send his son to be reincarnated in the underworld. Just as he was thinking about it, Su Tong suddenly leaned over and carefully took the oil lamp from his hand and looked at it carefully. "Be careful, be careful." The old man didn't want to let go, but he couldn't hold him back and was about to lose his strength. Su Tong looked at the oil lamp in front of him, squinted his eyes, and tilted his head to look at the pale old man. "Old man, just look at me and tell me, this is definitely not your retribution." The old man still didn't understand what Su Tong meant, so he nodded and was about to say something. Su Tong took a deep breath, then blew on the oil lamp. The weak light was blown away by him, and the lamp oil inside was also sprinkled on the ground. Seeing the disbelieving expression on the old man's face, he grinned, "Look, this is your retribution. The first volume is finished, I changed the status today, thank you all for your help, special thanks to my first leader 5 big fans. There is no way to add updates to the new book issue, I haven't saved the manuscript either, so this chapter will not be continued. I will finish this copy in one go. It is a 4,000-word chapter. Go to bed early tonight, take a rest, and resume daytime tomorrow. Renew. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 14. Su Tong left, and after silently reciting the word return in his heart, he disappeared in front of old man Li's eyes as he roared in pain. A huge pulling feeling came down, and the whole night's experience flashed before my eyes like a movie screen. At the end, the screen suddenly went black, and my eyes suddenly fell into boundless silence. Where is this? I don't know, where is that old man? Didn't he say he would take us to have a drink? Why did he bring us to this shabby place? There seems to be someone here, go in and take a look. Buzz, ka. With the sound of the door being pushed open, a ray of sunlight illuminated the darkness in front of him. 2 travelers outside the door cautiously poked their heads in. When they saw the messy room in front of them, they couldn't help but be filled with doubts. Suddenly the man walking in front of him suddenly had his eyelids twitching. Gold. I saw a few shining gold bars placed on the table, shining with a charming luster in the sun. Mine. The two people immediately rushed forward to grab it, and they struggled with the shining gold bars. During the fight, no one knew who closed the door, and the room suddenly became dark. There was just a rustling sound in the darkness. The sound was not harsh, but it made people feel uncomfortable all over. The two people who were still fighting for the gold couldn't help but become suspicious. One person took out a fire stick from his arms and blew it a few times. As the fire gradually illuminated the room, the two of them followed the direction of the sound and raised the fire folders in their hands. I saw an old man hanging on the beam. His face was distorted, his mouth was wide open, his eyes seemed to be squeezed out of his sockets, and his long tongue was sticking out. There was a white paper hanging on the clothes on his chest. The word hate was crookedly written on it in blood. Huh. As soon as a cool breeze blew, his eyes suddenly fell into darkness again. At the same time, a cold reminder sounded in Su Tong's ears. This scenario world has ended and mission rewards are being settled. Main line 1 of the script looking for the real murderer, the task is completed, and 60 script points are obtained. Scenario main task 2 relief, the task is completed, and 60 script points are obtained. You killed Paper Bride Jolan, who was controlled, and received a special reward, a bronze medal for the script. You killed Li Zongnan and received a special reward, 2 bronze medals for the script. You have obtained the plot prop Papermaker's book, please identify it yourself. You have obtained the special achievement Retributor title in the script kill, please check it yourself. Congratulations, you have completed the novice assessment, successfully completed a script to kill the world, and you have received a prop collection book. Please check it carefully, recite the prop book silently to recall it. As the sound ended, Su Tong closed his eyes and silently digested the information. But in front of him, his eyelids were constantly flashing with red and blue lights, and in his ears were chaotic roars and sirens. The chaotic noise forced him to open his eyes and take a look. But he saw that he was still standing on the road. In front of him was the broken guardrail. The traffic police had already set up a cordon and began to direct the traffic. The scene was in a mess, and the broken motorcycle was left on the driveway, waiting for a tow truck to take it away. As for the driver, he was already lying in a shroud. Su Tong couldn't help but raise his brows and looked across the road. However, in his impression, the sign that was supposed to be a script killing experience center turned into a beef ramen restaurant. Interesting. The problem in front of him that could not be explained by science not only did not confuse him, but made him look forward to it even more. At least judging from the information I received, this is the first time, but it will definitely not be the last. Thinking of this, he turned around and left the scene of the accident. Before he knew it, it was almost dawn and there were more and more cars on the street. After a sleepless night, he walked to a breakfast shop, took out 10 yuan from his pocket, ordered a bowl of tofu puffs and 3 fried dough sticks, and ate them happily. The food is simple, but it's cheap. The delicious and tender tofu is sprinkled with refreshing pickles and water celery, and is paired with freshly baked fried dough sticks. In the cool morning air, although it's not a delicacy, it's enough to soothe your restlessness. Soul. While eating, he filtered the information he had just received one by one. Apparently, after he completed the script world, not only did all his injuries disappear, but he also received some rewards. Although it is unclear what the role of the script points and the so-called bronze badge is, as a reward for the main mission, it should not be bad. At the same time, he noticed that there was something wrong with Zhou Yu's name. He was told on the prompt that his name was Jolan, so it was very likely that Zhou Yu did not tell the truth to them and deliberately hid his name. Finally, and most importantly, what is a prop book? Thinking of this, He opened his hands and tried to read the prop book silently in his mind. Soon a strange feeling flooded into his heart, and as he thought silently, a thick manual actually floated in his hand. I don't know what kind of material the cover of the manual is made of, but it feels like metal. The whole body exudes wisps of mysterious light. Glancing at the passers-by who were still having breakfast, no one seemed to notice the manual in his hand, so he simply opened the manual and read it slowly while eating. It's like looking at your cell phone while eating, except the manual is simpler. It hangs in front of you without him having to reach out to get it. Opening the first page, I saw 2 cards inside. A yellowed ancient book. Isn't it the papermaker's book I got? If I look carefully, there are annotations underneath. Papermaker's book, to be identified. You can perform a preliminary appraisal at the front desk of the script killing, or you can find a peer expert in the script world for an in-depth appraisal. After the appraisal, you can obtain some of the skills. Seeing this, the fried dough sticks he brought to his mouth couldn't help but stop at his lips, staring directly at the last few words to gain some skills. Can I also control the paper man? When this thought occurred, Su Tong's eyes narrowed into slits. Then he looked at another card. This card is completely different from the papermaker's book. The light red edge exudes an indescribable evil aura. On the card is a paper man with a ferocious face. Retributor is a special title that cannot be discarded, destroyed, or traded. The carrier can choose whether to activate it. After activation, you will temporarily gain a mental shield, which can protect you from 80% mental damage and 30% physical damage. However, within 24 hours after activation, you will suffer backlash from the curse. Please experience the specific backlash process by yourself. This title is obviously a double-edged sword. But for me, it is worth it. Immune to at least 80% of mental damage, it is definitely a magic weapon that can save lives in critical moments. Su Tong thought in his mind that Zhou Yu was most likely confused by the old man's magic and fell into the trap. If they had this ability, maybe old man Li might not be her opponent. At this time, he noticed that in the upper left corner of his manual, a series of numbers and 3 copper-colored badges should be the rewards given to him after completing the mission. While he was thinking about the use of these things, a piece of news was being reported on the TV in the breakfast shop, which caught his attention. A serious car accident occurred on Huancheng West Road this morning. The vehicle driven by the driver Zhou suddenly lost control. After colliding with Wang, a student who was riding on the non-motorized lane at the time, the vehicle hit the guardrail and fell into the river under the bridge. The vehicle is currently salvage is in progress and the cause of the accident is under investigation. There were not many people in the restaurant, but after seeing the news, they couldn't help but raise their heads to watch the news. When they saw the body of the college student lying on the ground with his head covered by clothes, people couldn't help but feel sorry. Someone even muttered, "Oh, female drivers do a lot of harm to people." After saying that, the young man eating next to him retorted, "It may not be the fault of the female driver. Some cars cannot stop. Who can you blame?" "Nonsense, how can the car not stop? How can one call a car if it can't stop?" Several people were still arguing, but Su Tong had already stood up and left. After eating and drinking, he took a bus that was full of old men and women in the morning and disappeared into the crowd. Outside the gate of Zishun Garden Community, Li Bo shook his big gold chain and walked out slowly, feeling indescribably beautiful. The cheeks full of flesh were rarely filled with smiles. Even the neighbor who was yelled at by the fat man on weekdays rarely said hello today, which made the neighbor look weird. He once wondered if the fat man was drunk last night and peed in front of his house again. Stepping to the guard room, "Who sent the express? Do you want me to pick it up myself?" As he said this, Li Bo opened the door and took a look. The smile on his face suddenly froze on his face, his eyes widened, and he subconsciously wanted to run out. On the chair in the guard room, Su Tong was looking at him with squinted eyes, holding up the empty box in his hand. "Hello, please sign for your express delivery." Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shuigan Xiao. Chapter 15. Li Bo stared blankly at the box that Su Tong delivered to him. When he took it over, he found that the boxes were empty and there was not even a courier order on them. But looking at the pen that Su Tong handed over, Li Bo took it with a confused face and signed his name on it. "Okay, let's go. It's almost noon. Let's find a place to eat." He hooked his arm around Li Bo's neck and pulled him out. "Hey, don't leave, you are delivering the goods," old man Zhang from the guard room shouted while holding up the box. Su Tong turned around, raised his hands above his head and made a heart-shaped gesture towards the uncle, saying, "I am." His old man Zhang took a breath. "Are all young people today having such fun?" "Boss, 2 big bowls of beef noodles, a big plate of chicken, and 2 bottles of Luoyang Palace." As I approached the store door, the TV hanging on the wall was still reporting the news about this morning's car accident. Li Bo waved to the owner of the restaurant and shouted, "It's a small fly restaurant." Judging from Li Bo's appearance, I knew he was a regular customer. Then he took Su Tong to the last row, asked Su Tong to sit down, and then said helplessly, "Brother, why did you find me?" Su Tong stretched out his palm toward Li Bo and looked at him with a smile. "Guess." If it had been anyone else, Li Bo would have slammed the table and cursed, but the person sitting in front of him was Su Tong, and he couldn't get angry at all. 5 round fingers scratched his head and asked tentatively, "Lack of money?" Su Tong shook his head. "Keep guessing." I can't guess." Seeing this, Su Tong casually called out his prop book. Seeing the prop book he called out, Li Bo was suddenly startled. "Eh? You have one too?" After speaking, Li Bo covered his mouth. Sure enough, this prop book cannot be seen by ordinary people, only people like them who have participated in the script world can see it. "Where's yours? Let me take a look." Before Li Bo wanted to take a closer look, Su Tong put away his prop book and asked Li Bo to take out his prop book. Now Li Bo was in a bit of a dilemma. Although he was afraid of Su Tong, this was the real world. It was not difficult to show him the items in his prop book, but if he asked for it, he would have to give it to him or not. While hesitating, the boss had already brought the dishes. Although it is a small shop, Li Bo may become a regular customer, but the taste is definitely not bad. A big bowl of beef noodles. The noodles are made of wide-cut noodles. The soup is oily and bright red. There are several pieces of beef noodles with plump color on top. They are plump and juicy, making you want to eat it. Su Tong picked up his chopsticks and started eating. Li Bo sat opposite him and hesitated for a while before whispering, "Brother Su, if you have any difficulties, just tell me, I still have some money, you can take it, don't say brother, I'm not loyal." As he spoke, Li Bo took out a wad of cash from his bag and placed it on the table. Su Tong glanced at it, then put the money directly into his pocket, opened his hand, props book. Hearing this, Li Bo jumped up unconsciously, and his tone was not as kind as before. "Brother Su, you have taken the money, why don't you let me go?" Props book. Su Tong continued to eat the noodles without raising his head. The noodles were stronger than he expected, and the soup was flavorful. It was authentic beef soup, and it tasted really great. But this time Li Bo quit, and said with a cold face, "Brother Su, I know you are powerful, and I can't afford to offend you, but if I don't give it, what can you do?" As he spoke, he pointed to the camera in the corner of the hotel. "What can you do to me? Don't forget, this is a society governed by law, and there is no room for your grudges and grudges. If you dare to take action, the store will give you a call and the police will arrive in 10 minutes. The roadside is all under surveillance and you can't even run away." Su Tong said nothing and continued to eat noodles with his head buried in big mouths. Seeing this, Li Bo wanted to run away and stood up, Okay, brother Su, you are a sensible person. I will treat you to this meal. If you need anything else in the future, we will contact you again. As he said that, he was about to leave, but just as he was about to move, Su Tong's hand pinched his wrist, and his other hand silently picked up the beer bottle on the table, props book. Li Bo's heart trembled, and he almost agreed, but when he thought about the things in his prop book, he suppressed the fear of this guy in his heart and put on a smile. Why, I won't give it to you, you still dare to kill me? Our country advocates that murder cases must be solved, you don't know that. Su Tong raised his eyebrows slightly and raised his head to look at Li Bo, just as he was about to speak. As soon as the news turned on the TV, a report was broadcast. Yesterday morning, there was a riot in our city's mental hospital. A mental patient took advantage of the chaos to escape from the hospital. The patient suffered from severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. Please contact the local authorities immediately after discovering it. Do not try to contact or anger the other person. The following are the patient's physical features. After hearing the report on TV, Li Bo turned around and looked at the photo on TV. Wasn't it Su Tong himself? Holy shit, he really is. The corner of his mouth twitched unconsciously a few times, and he squinted at the bottle of wine in Su Tong's hand. After thinking for 3 long seconds, Li Bo sat back on the chair with a pop. Brother, I was wrong. As he spoke, Li Bo quickly called out his prop book and opened it with his own hands for Su Tong to see. Seeing this, Su Tong picked up the wine bottle, took a sip, patted his belly, and burped with satisfaction. His eyes jumped and glanced at Li Bo's prop book. In fact, Li Bo's luck was pretty good. Although it was a bit miserable, he completed the entire task and also had 120 script points. Although he did not kill Zhou Nan directly, he caused great damage indirectly, so he received a title. A last stand. After the title is activated, it will allow him to obtain the King Kong state for 2 seconds. He can be exempted from all negative effects for 2 seconds, but after 2 seconds, the negative effects will be doubled. If used skillfully, this title is definitely a very practical ability. In addition, this guy actually has a few gold bars in his prop book. No wonder he is so generous. But what really matters to him are 2 other things. Magic Bell. One of the 32 treasures of the 8 gates, it has the ability to restrain the soul. Additional skills, soul capture. Can be used when full advantage is available. Each use will have a 24-hour cooling period. Each time you use it, 2 script points will be deducted. If the script points are not enough, you cannot use it. Additional skill 2. Unknown. Please find the unlocking conditions yourself. Sure enough, it's this bell. Su Tong breathed a sigh of relief. The reason why he came here was precisely for this demon bell. This thing was finally given to Li Bo to complete the task. I am not sure whether Li Bo can bring this thing out, but if he brings it out, I am bound to get it. After all, he is the descendant of the 8 gates. As for the other thing, Su Tong was quite surprised. This thing was the bronze mirror that Zhou Yu took out at the beginning. I didn't expect that Li Bo would bring this thing out. Not to mention the 2 props he got, the dagger and the dark money. Wang Xiaowai's prop was a jade token made of black jade, which he had put on his body at the time, but it disappeared after he came back. I estimate that this thing should be a plot prop and cannot be brought out at all. But he didn't expect that Li Bo actually brought out the bronze mirror, which really surprised him. Where did this mirror come from? He asked, looking at the notes on the bronze mirror. Osteoscope. The bright moon is 3 inches round, and things in the mirror are different. The moon waxes and wanes, and people have unpredictable intentions. The mirror can reveal the demonic appearance, but it is difficult to see the ugliness of the human heart. Additional skills, bone drawing. After use, you can reflect in the mirror to see if the other party is disguising. Can be used 3 times a day. Each time it consumes 2 script points. The cooling time is 5 minutes. Note, if the opponent is too strong, the bone removing skill will be invalid. I found this mirror in the closet when I was hiding in it. Brother Sue, you have a sharp eye. This mirror. Li Bo's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the bell would not be saved no matter what, but he must keep the mirror. With this mirror, if I enter the script world next time, this thing will be my life-saving talisman. Su Tong saw Li Bo's little thoughts, and he was really not interested in this mirror. It was a treasure to others, but it was undoubtedly useless to him. If the other party's acting skills have reached a level that you can't even tell, then it would be interesting if you were deceived. The bell is mine, and half the gold. He offered his price generously, which almost made Li Bo cry. However, after careful consideration, Li Bo still agreed honestly. After all, a society governed by law cannot control mental illness. He obediently took out the demonic bell and 4 gold bars, and handed them to Su Tong with a sad face. Su Tong tried to throw these things into his prop book, and sure enough, there were 2 more cards in the prop book. It seems that the prop book itself is also a great thing. Gone. After getting the things, Su Tong left without looking back. Although Li Bo seemed to have the potential to become a human shield, he was not the one he thought could be his partner. Thinking of his companions, he couldn't help but look in the direction of the mental hospital, the corners of his mouth raised involuntarily, and thought to himself, hey, this fool must still be in the dark room. Li Bo, who was beaten hard by Su Tong, was still sitting on the chair until Su Tong left, unable to accept the feeling of someone taking the duck out of his mouth. With his face in a daze, tears of grievance rolled down his face. Just as he was in a trance, he suddenly felt his shoulders sink. He raised his head and saw that it was Old Man Zhang who was guarding the gate of his community. Seeing the aggrieved look on Li Bo's face, Old Man Zhang patted him on the shoulder and comforted him, "My child, don't feel bad. Listen to my uncle's advice. The water on this road is too deep. You can't control it, my child." Although Li Bo didn't understand what it meant, when he thought of Su Tong's face, he couldn't stop crying, "Damn, this bitch is so bullying." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 16. Sir, the total is 25,348. I recommend you to become a member. You can enjoy a 20% discount. The discount is? No, just this price. In front of the mirror, Su Tong carefully examined the brand new clothes on his body. It is said that people rely on clothes and horses rely on saddles. After putting on a brand new outfit, his whole temperament has undergone a qualitative change. I have to say that expensive things have almost no shortcomings except that they are expensive. After leaving Li Bo, Su Tong found a gold shop and sold a gold bar. The money earned was spent wildly in this shopping mall. But he didn't come to experience the feeling of a nouveau riche, but to package himself from head to toe. After all, the police were still looking for him. The best way is to leave the city. But he escaped, and he didn't have an ID card with him. Even if he wanted to take a train, it was difficult. If he wanted to leave, he had to either ask for a private car to take him away, or leave in a black car. But right now, he doesn't want to leave the city. After all, there is still a good brother who has shared the joys and sorrows with him in the mental hospital. Of course there are no absolutes. Although the police are looking for him, they are doing so out of a helpful attitude. They cannot issue a wanted order for a patient, and there will be no record of him in the police file system. They are more worried about whether they will go crazy and cause a case of personal injury. When the limelight passes and the police realize that they have not caused any danger, they will no longer worry about their own affairs. As for the hospital, I'm afraid I just want to put things to rest, and by then I will be completely free. So the most important thing for you right now is to disguise yourself as much as possible. Dressed in high-end attire and with a neater hairstyle, it looks high profile but is also the best way to hide it. Even if they see the missing person notice issued by the hospital, people will only think that they are like him, but not that they are. I believe no one would associate such a handsome and successful person in front of the mirror with a patient who had just escaped from a mental hospital. As for the original clothes, Su Tong naturally threw them into the trash can. Sir, would you like to try the latest script-killing game launched by our store? Our store is a national chain and has various game types. Whether it is suspense style or the popular pure love style, our store has them all. At the elevator entrance, a girl enthusiastically greeted him and sold him the script for their store. If it were before last night, I would definitely be very interested in the script, the girl said. But after last night, the poster in the hands of the girl in front of him, no matter how gorgeous the promotion, seemed to him like a child playing house, boring. The difference is like a Syrian veteran who has just come off the battlefield and someone suddenly recommends him a real-life CS game. However, the girl obviously didn't see the impatience in Su Tong's eyes. She glanced around and whispered in a seductive tone. In addition, our store has exclusive scripts for the top membership mode. You can choose from 1 to 3 exclusive teammates to experience the exclusive King's Harem script. She was afraid that Su Tong wouldn't believe it, so she took out her mobile phone and showed him the photos. Sure enough, there were several girls in the photos who were dressed in sexy and revealing clothes. Today's event, top members only have an initial charge of 38,000, and they also get 4,000 as a bonus, which is quite a deal. It's hard to imagine that there is such a service in the most prosperous shopping mall in the city. What's even more surprising is that I actually got to know the game script killing again in this way. But it's a pity that he is not interested in putting his extra energy into this boring game. Ding. After rejecting the girl, Su Tong stepped into the elevator, but he felt a special kind of restlessness in his heart. He wanted to go to the script killing experience center and return to the script world that excited him. This uncontrollable restlessness was getting stronger and stronger, just when he was about to go crazy. Ding. As the elevator door leading to the first floor slowly opened, Su Tong's eyelids twitched. He saw that the mall hall in front of him was supposed to be filled with people, but at this moment, there was not a single person in sight. In the empty hall, not even a light was turned on. Zizi, zizi, duh. In the darkness, after a few poorly connected electric sparks flashed, the flickering neon lights gradually illuminated the surroundings in the darkness. Script Killing Experience Hall. Looking at the familiar sign, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. The air was filled with the smell of corruption, but it made him more excited than the nicotine in cigarettes. With brisk steps, Su Tong happily pushed open the cold glass door. It's still the same coffee shop-like furnishings, and it's still the familiar front desk. When he saw that sweet face, Su Tong even thought she was so cute. Welcome. The girl raised her head, with a standardized smile on her face, and looked at Su Tong. Sorry, the new round of script killing has not started yet. Please come back in 3 days after receiving the invitation card. Hearing such a reply, the smile on Su Tong's face suddenly froze, and he stared at the woman blankly for a moment. Sir, do you have any more questions? The girl asked patiently. Hearing her question, Su Tong raised his head with a bored expression, thought for a moment, and asked, is there a way for me to find the store at any time? This question is very important. The speeding driver last night suddenly encountered a car accident and thus got himself an invitation card. After entering the door, he found out that the driver was Wang Xiaowai's classmate and was already late. In addition, in the morning, he heard the news of the deaths of Zhou Yu and Wang Xiaowai, both of whom also died in accidents. This can't be a coincidence. It's more like some kind of punishment mechanism. The consequences of being late and failing the mission may be the accidental accident that people heard about in the news. You have become an exclusive member of our store. You will get a specific entry time after receiving the invitation card, and you will see the sign of our store within 30 minutes in advance. However, under special circumstances, you can spend 2 script points to get a quick way to reach the store, for example, right now. Oh. Su Tong nodded and called out his prop book. Sure enough, his script score had changed from 120 to 118. It seemed that I had consumed these 2 script points just now when my thoughts were confused. It seems a bit expensive. 2 script points may not sound like much at first, even insignificant, but 2 script points are enough for you to activate your title once, or even use the soul-binding skill of Evil Bell once. He now seems to have realized the irreplaceable value of the script. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have needed the gold bars. He sighed, believing that idiot Li Bo had not realized the importance of script points. If he had changed the condition to ask for half of his script points, I believe he would have been very happy. But some things are just like that. Missed opportunities are gone if you miss them. Even if you go to Li Bo with the gold now, Li Bo will never give him the script. So he continued to ask, what is the function of the bronze emblem? There are many, please dig out the details yourself. The girl cherished words like gold and was unwilling to explain too much on this issue, but her slender index finger still slid slowly and skillfully from the corner of her lips, and gently rubbed the stained lipstick on her index finger. Unfortunately, her performance was ignored by Su Tong and he continued to ask the next question, if I have items that need to be appraised. Appraisal. The girl raised her eyebrows slightly, and there were slight wrinkles on her fair face. Our store provides appraisal services. Since you are an exclusive member of our store, we can give you a 20% discount. Basic appraisal only requires 5 script points. 5 script points is not expensive, but it is definitely not cheap either. Just when Su Tong was about to agree, he suddenly realized something and waved his hand. My friend's is cheaper, and it also has your face. Forget it, let's go. My face. The girl's pupils tightened and she quickly took out the mirror and looked carefully. When she turned around, she saw that Su Tong had already walked to the door. She hurriedly said, wait a minute. I can also give you a cheaper price, but you first need to explain clearly what happened to my face. The last time she was looked at by this kid made her feel uncomfortable, which made her suspicious for a long time. This time when he was mentioned again, she could not help but murmur in her heart. This problem. You have to believe that as a professional plastic surgeon, I can guarantee that I will be responsible for every word I say, but... He also awkwardly picked up an inconspicuous hair on his clothes and rubbed it back and forth between his index finger and thumb. The girl's eyes widened in disbelief. This guy actually asked for money from her? After being stunned for a moment, the girl finally lowered her head in frustration, her delicate facial features distorted, as if she had made a difficult decision. Free appraisal. Okay. The item card marked with the item to be appraised had been sent to the girl by him, and everything seemed to be premeditated. Humph. You'd better pray and don't lie to me, otherwise. The girl held the card in her hand expressionlessly. When she saw the strange dark lines on the card, she couldn't help but frown. I saw her taking out a square box from under the table. After opening the box, she carefully took out a black gavel and pointed it at the card on the table and struck it hard. Click. The hammer did not actually land on the card, but instead seemed to encounter some resistance in the air. Following a sound similar to the breaking of glass, the cards on the table suddenly began to be filled with wisps of black light. You're pretty lucky. This kind of thing is usually not available to a novice like you. After the girl looked at the cards on the table, she was a little surprised by the special nature of this prop card. Su Tong couldn't wait to put the card back into his prop book, only to see lines of new information appearing in front of him on the originally empty prop card. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 17. Papermaker's Book. If the items inherited from the 8 miscellaneous studies cannot be affirmed by the previous owner, they cannot be obtained. Comes with Passive 1, Origami. The basic skills of paper craftsman enable the bearer to have the basic skills of origami. Success rate, please practice on your own. Additional skill 1, paper control. You can control 1 or 2 paper figures. The paper figures can be equipped with weapons, but the total weight of the paper figures cannot exceed 30 grams. Controlling effects, practice on your own. Each time lasts for 30 minutes. If additional minutes are needed, an additional 2 script points will be consumed every 10 minutes. Cooling time, 5 minutes. Each use consumes 2 script points. Such American Samoa double paper figures, the cost is doubled. Additional skill 2, Spirit Possession. Adding spiritual reinforcement to ordinary paper stamps can make the paper stamps more resilient and strengthened. The specific effect depends on the material. Toilet paper is invalid. Each use consumes 3 script points. The above are the basic identification effects. If you want to improve your skills, please try in-depth identification. Looking at the information that appeared in front of me, even though I was still unfamiliar with these prop cards, I could already feel the importance of this prop in my heart. He couldn't help but replay Old Man Lee's expression in his mind. He thought deeply about this prop card for a long time, and finally couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth in a subtle arc, and then laughed out loud. At that time, Old Man Lee talked about a lot of things, but he never talked about the essence. It can be understood that whether he taught himself the skills of a papermaker or allowed himself to keep this papermaker's book, they were all trying to paint a bigger picture. It's just that maybe Old Man Lee never dreamed that his cake would come true as he painted it. If it hadn't been for his nod of approval, this papermaker's book would never have been able to be brought out of the script space. Now that I think about it, it's really, fate, so wonderful. Seeing that Su Tong was silent for a long time, smiling stupidly into the air, the girl standing in front of the counter finally couldn't help it anymore. Are you okay? What happened to my face? She frowned and glared at Su Tong. If this guy dared to tell lies to her, she would definitely kill him. After all, she couldn't sleep well all day yesterday because of this face. Seeing that the woman was about to get angry, Su Tong could only calm down his thoughts, coughed twice, and picked up the paper on the table. His eyes studied her face carefully. You put too much powder on your face, but it can't hide the spots on your face. You painted your eyebrows thick, but they don't match your face shape. We can consider local liposuction and laser spot removal. Corrective osteotomy surgery ensures that there will be no trace of the surgery. He carefully searched for all possible flaws on the woman's face, listening to the questions coming from his mouth. The girl's face was uncertain for a moment, and her heart was extremely irritable. Under the table, a clicking sound could be heard, but she didn't know what it was. Suddenly, Su Tong Xiao paused. In short, you have a lot of problems, but they are all small problems. The biggest problem now is. The girl's eyelids jumped involuntarily, and she put one hand under the table unconsciously. Of course Su Tong saw these little moves, but he pretended not to notice and silently took the girl's other hand. If I told you, I would die. Do you believe it? The girl's hands under the table tightened, and after a moment she smiled and said, then you tell me first. Some words are meaningless when spoken. I wrote them on this piece of paper. If you want to know, just open it and read it. The girl lowered her head, and a ring with blooming paper flowers was already put on her finger. Only you. The play button on the radio on the table was gently pressed. The light shone on her face, and a rare faint blush appeared under her pale skin. When she was stunned, a hand suddenly slapped the girl's shoulder hard from behind. Before the girl could recover, her annoying teasing voice came from behind, "Hey, this is the iron tree blooming, it only happens once in 100 years. Everyone is gone, why are you still stunned?" The girl looked up and saw that Su Tong's back had disappeared behind the glass door. Looking back, it is no surprise that it was the Jiangnan woman who was the host of Script Killing before. She was wearing a tight cheongsam that showed off her perfect curves. She waved the paper fan in her hand, and her charming big eyes were staring at the ring on her hand. "You little goblin, let's see if I don't chop your mouth." I don't know whether it was a good thing that was revealed or she was annoyed by her teasing. The girl became angry and swung the axe under the table and struck the woman. The other party stepped aside and said inhumanely, "Hey, where did this wild man come from? He just touched his hand. That's it? If I give you some stick honey, why don't you tear this house apart?" As she spoke, the woman picked up the fan in her hand and smashed it towards the girl's face. The music from the radio continues to play. Under the light of the bar, two women with attractive figures were wrestling together. It was normal at first, but as they twisted, the shadows on the wall began to become more and more distorted. It's a pity that Su Tong didn't see these, otherwise he would have to appreciate them for a while. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he saw a large shopping mall full of people in front of him. When he looked back, he saw that the door of Script Killing was gone, replaced by the door of Tong Grentang Pharmacy. The display on the door also flashed a slogan offering discounts and eggs. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and flashed through his mind what he saw in the mirror on the table. He couldn't help but grin. "It's so exciting, I'm alive again, hee hee." After saying that, he turned around and walked straight to the gold shop. The sun shines through the white window screens, and a violin piece called Siberian Wind is playing on the speakers. The solid-colored knife and fork gently cut the beef on the plate, and put it into his mouth in a leisurely manner. Occasionally, he would raise his head and look at the sparkling waves reflected on the Kaiwan Lake in the distance. On such a sunny afternoon, no one would be in a bad mood. But Su Tong is an exception. I saw that the room, whether it was the bed, the floor, or even the sofa, was covered with all kinds of paper stamps, and the trash can was filled with crushed waste paper. There were various exquisite objects placed on the small table beside him, some of which he folded into ingots, and some of which he folded into daggers. There are even some calves and silly pigs with lifelike expressions that look more like handicrafts. Even the knife and fork in front of him was the product of his spirit. When the knife and fork is cutting the beef, it makes rustling sounds on the plate from time to time. It looks almost like a real knife and fork. But just that, he was not satisfied. Because the probability of success in possessing a spirit is simply frighteningly low. After 2 days of sleepless experiments in the room, he concluded the probability of a successful spirit possession. For ordinary yellow paper that you buy from a longevity material store, the probability of being possessed by a spirit is 60%. This probability is not high. After 2 days of crazy practice, it has been improved to 65%. But these yellow papers, even after being possessed, still do not have the hardness and toughness to meet their needs. Not to mention killing people, even killing a chicken is impossible. So he found another way and changed to paper with higher hardness, such as for a paper, but the result was still not very satisfactory, and the probability of success was only 50%. No, sometimes not even 50%. He also prepared silver foil and gold foil. As a result, the silver foil occasionally succeeded, but the gold foil still failed until now. He has already spent a full 80 script points on this, completely burning money like crazy. But that's not to say there are no gains. The failure in enchantment brought about a huge contrast in paper control. So much so that now he didn't even bother to eat, and let the 2 paper figures holding knives and forks on the table feed them to his mouth. Perhaps he was too tired, so he closed his eyes and began to rest. At this time, the music playback ended and the local news network started to play randomly. In addition, there are recent frequent car accidents, please pay attention to safety when driving, etc. As he listened, Su Tong's ears twitched and he slowly opened his eyes. Just listen to such a report being inserted in the news. Yesterday, Mr. Li Keqiang, the founder of the National Intangible Cultural Heritage Center, sadly passed away. His handmade kites have set many world records. Among them, the largest kite, the Chinese dragon, is 87 meters long. The dragon is vivid and has 57 sections. The body represents 56 ethnic groups. Listening to the news reports, Su Tong couldn't help but fall deeply into thought. After a moment, he sat up suddenly, packed his things, and prepared to go out. In terms of craftsmanship, even if he worked behind closed doors for 10 years, he might not be able to figure out any skills, so he planned to go to the old city for a walk. He remembered that there seemed to be a street there that was dedicated to making longevity materials. However, just when his hand was about to open the door lock, he suddenly froze and looked at the purple invitation card on the door handle. He couldn't help but said in surprise, "Huh? What a coincidence." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 18. El City was once the ancient capital. However, after the reform and opening up, on the one hand it failed to keep up with the times due to certain policy reasons. On the other hand, it also gave a large amount of resources to the development of nearby provinces and cities. So many years have passed, and the city has gradually climbed up to the standards of a second-tier city through tourism. The vigorously developed cultural street of the old city is lined with red lanterns. At night, it becomes the famous red light. Ahem, no, it is a snack street. No matter it is day or night, there are crowds of people here, but the adjacent street seems deserted. There is a signboard with the word longevity hanging on the shop on the side of the street. There are garlands beside the door. There are 3 or 5 old people sitting at the entrance of the shop drinking tea and chatting. The business was deserted, and there was only occasional business. The comings and goings were just the same, and most people just paid the bills in a hurry and left. Lao Zhou was sitting on a chair, watching the news on his mobile phone. From time to time he smiled and chatted with the elderly people around him about daily routines, such as the prices of vegetables becoming cheaper again, and the recent rise in housing prices. While chatting, Lao Zhou suddenly raised his eyebrows and looked at the young man approaching the store. When he saw the young man walking to the paper wreath and staring at several paper figures, Lao Zhou immediately stood up from his chair and greeted him. He walked up to the young man. "Little brother, our wreaths and paper figurines are all the latest models. They are delivered to your door at a reasonable price. Are you here to see them for the elders in the family, or?" Lao Zhou stood behind him and asked in a low voice. People in this line of work cannot stand in front of guests, let alone greet them with a smile. Su Tong didn't say anything to Lao Zhou, he just pointed at the paper man in front of him, and with a tap of his finger, puff, a hole appeared on the head of the paper man. Seeing this, Su Tong shook his head with disappointment, left 100 yuan as compensation, and walked to the next house. After visiting several houses in a row, Su Tong couldn't find the paper figurine he liked. It feels like these paper cuts in the store are just like toys. A few pieces of paper are stuck together, sprayed with some paint and it's done. This is not fooling people, it's simply fooling ghosts. Looking ahead, there is a drum tower, which is the old city gate of Old El City. It is said that the Japanese army fought for a long time and did not capture it. Now, only the drum tower is left, and the city walls on both sides have long disappeared. Just when he was about to look elsewhere, he turned around and saw Boss Joe standing not far behind him with a smile on his face. Seeing his gaze, she hurriedly walked towards him with small steps. "Little brother, are you looking for someone or something?" We all know several stores in this area. Tell me and I will help you find it. Su Tong looked at him suspiciously, and after making sure that Boss Joe had no ill intentions, he took out a paper flower he made and handed it to him. Look, who sells this thing? Ouch. Seeing the paper flowers in his hand, Boss Joe opened his mouth and was speechless for a long time. He carefully took his hand, rubbed it gently with his fingers for a few times, and shook his head. Hey, I'm feeling better. I haven't seen such beautiful paper flowers in years. As he said that, he returned the paper flowers to Su Tong, pulled him to sit on a chair by the roadside and said, I have been doing this for more than 20 years. I inherited it from my father's generation, and I am working here. Your paper flowers are an old craft, and no one is doing it now. Boss Joe is not telling a lie. In the past, the craftsmanship of the elders was very particular about the wrinkles of a paper flower. If an apprentice dared to make a paper flower with paper pulp, he would not have the shame to say who taught him this. Not to mention, as long as the eyes of the paper figures made at that time were clicked, they would look like living people. Anyone who looked at them would feel terrified. But it turned out to be very expensive. No one, not a wealthy family, could afford so many paper figures. Later, times changed, and people didn't pay so much attention to it. Cheapness was the last word. Only the wreaths in his shop are imported wholesale. If you look closely, you can see that they are all tied with wires at the back. I heard that in a few months we won't be allowed to burn wreaths in the city. We old guys have all discussed clearing out the goods and changing our profession. I'm afraid you won't even be able to find this kind of ordinary stuff by then. It's here. Boss Joe was a very down-to-earth person, and he did not shy away from the purpose of coming forward. However, after learning what Su Tong was looking for, he made it very clear. That's it, thank you boss. Hearing Boss Joe's words, Su Tong's heart froze. Originally, he was inspired by the news and decided to learn from an old craftsman to see if he could find a breakthrough. Unexpectedly, the result turned out to be like this. Unable to conceal his disappointment, he said goodbye to his boss and turned to leave. It seems that if you want to achieve in-depth identification, you may have to go into the script world to find it. But the question is, in the script world, even if he completes the main mission, how much time can be left for him to explore? Even if he found it, he couldn't be thrown out of the script world before even saying a few words. The more I think about it, the more annoyed I feel. It's just that this era has progressed too fast, so quickly that things that should have been left behind have completely disappeared in the long river of history. Little brother, little brother. In a daze, Su Tong suddenly heard someone calling him from behind. When he turned around, he saw that it was Boss Joe who was chasing him. He ran up, took a few breaths, patted his forehead and said, I forgot, there is no one selling these paper flowers, but there is a master who used to do this. You can go and find out. But if a person is alive at least, it can reach 80 or more, it depends on your own luck. As he spoke, Boss Joe pointed him in the direction of the drum tower in front of him. After you pass the drum tower, and then cross the intersection, look for the house with the pomegranate tree in front of the door. That person's surname is Song, and his name is Song. Anyway, Mr. Song, I met him once a few years ago. If you go to see him, remember to bring some braised pork. After hearing what Boss Joe said, Su Tong was overjoyed and thanked Boss Joe repeatedly. Of course, he stuffed a wad of banknotes into Boss Joe's hand. The happy Boss Joe was beaming. Following Boss Joe's guidance, he walked east along the pedestrian street in front of him. After passing the intersection, he didn't go far before he actually found a house with a pomegranate tree in front of the door. Even though the old city has undergone street renovation work several times, and every door has been painted with neat new walls, this dilapidated door still looks out of place. He tried to push the door, but it was unlocked, which made Su Tong feel a little hopeful. However, when he pushed the door and walked into the yard, the hope that had just been raised suddenly cooled down. The yard is actually still a dirt road, overgrown with weeds. Inside are a few bungalows, a medium-sized yard, and a few poplar trees planted sparsely. I don't know what it was in the water tank on the side, but it was emitting an indescribable smell. Seeing this, Su Tong felt a chill in his heart. This place looked like it had been abandoned for many years. The glass windows of the houses on both sides were covered in gray and nothing could be seen. Su Tong tried to push the door open a few times, but found nothing except falling dust. With the idea of coming here, he walked to the door of the main house and stretched out his hand to push it. Buzz. As the door was slowly pushed open, a thick musty smell filled the air, making him wrinkle his nose unconsciously. It was obviously daytime, but the room gave people a dusty look that made it difficult to see clearly. When the light from outside shines in, the sunlight seems to be blocked and diffused by the dust in the air. But when he saw the furnishings in the room clearly, he stood there blankly, his face full of shock and surprise. Like a boy who discovered a treasure, he walked in the door with curiosity on his face. The 2 rows of Taishi chairs in the room were actually filled with people. The old man held a cigarette rod in his hand, and a child on the side held up a match to light his cigarette. The girl on the left held a kettle and poured tea for everyone, but one foot stepped on the instep of the young man next to him, and the young man grinned in pain. In the misty clouds in the room, I actually felt like traveling through time to the distant past. I came to a distant past and heard the sounds of that history in this house. The lifelike expressions of each person are so exquisite that even the wrinkles on their faces look so natural. If you don't look carefully, it's hard to even notice that the people in front of you are actually paper figures made of paper. He stood in front of the old man and looked at the beard on the old man's face, the nails on his hands, and the perfect fit of every piece of paper pulp. The details were packed to the extreme, making it difficult to distinguish the real from the fake. Boom! The clock on the wall rang. Su Tong followed the sound and found that it was already 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Just when he was about to speak, suddenly his wrist tightened, and he saw that the paper figure sitting in front of him slowly opened his eyelids. 2 pairs of black and white eyes stared at him sideways, and his hoarse voice echoed in the empty room, "Young man, don't leave once you're here, stay with me." Hiss. Looking at the old man in front of him, Su Tong's pupils tightened and he stared straight at him. Then the whites of his eyes rolled up. After shaking for a few times, his body straightened back and fell heavily to the ground. Bang! The heavy falling sound caused the smile on the old man's face to freeze, and he looked at Su Tong blankly. Bang! As soon as the cigarette rod in his hand was loosened, the emerald cigarette pot suddenly fell to pieces on the ground. Boy, boy! When he put his trembling hand under his nose to explore, the old man was stunned. He sat on the chair in shock for a long time before slapping his thigh. "Oh, what is this? Young man, you said I wouldn't have scared you if I had known. You have made my old man sinful." He howled for a while, then put his hand up again without giving up. After confirming that he was really breathless, his expression became even more panicked, and he hurriedly groped around on his body. "Call 120, call 120, young man, please hold on, my cell phone, where is my cell phone?" He groped for it, but today he couldn't find his mobile phone, which he usually kept at hand. He anxiously tore open the thick layer of paper pulp on his body, sweating profusely. At this time, one hand raised up, pointed to the mobile phone on the table and said, "It's here. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 19. Oh, okay, thank you, Ed. The old man held his cell phone and was in a trance for a moment. He looked back at Su Tong, who was lying on the ground. Seeing this guy staring at him, he couldn't help but said angrily, "Are you not dead? I think I can still save it." After Su Tong finished speaking, he closed his eyes again and crossed his hands on his chest. "Well, very peaceful. Hey, you bastard who beat that egg, you deceived your Uncle Song's head." Now the old man understood. With two hands that had no place to rest, he picked up the broken cigarette stick on the ground, raised and dropped it 3 times in front of Su Tong's face, and finally hit it hard on the table, venting his anger on the cigarette stick. The final stubbornness. Su Tong raised one eyelid and said with a smile, "Isn't this going to add some valuable life experience to you, old man?" "Get out." The old man curled his lips and was so angry that he almost threw the solace of his shoes and hit someone. He waved his hand to signal Su Tong to get out of here. Seeing that the old man was really angry and the kind that was hard to coax, he could only sit up from the ground. "No, old man, what you did just now was so amazing that I almost couldn't breathe. Look, look. The back of my head was swollen." He opened his collar and turned his head to show the old man. The old man was very angry, but it was obvious that the back of his head was really swollen, but he still felt nervous, and with a touch of his hand, he was thrown out of the big bag. Thinking about it, it seems easy to push straight through just now, but most people can't do it. There is such a move in Peking opera, called the zombie throw. In addition to learning to release the force, the more important thing is to overcome psychological fear. The head cannot be hooked up to the neck. It does not take 5 or 6 years of practice, and no ordinary person can do it. Looking at the bag on Su Tong's head again, the old man's anger disappeared and he thought to himself, "Could it be that I really scared people?" At this time, he raised his nose, and a strong and familiar fragrance of sauce blended into his nasal cavity. He took a deep breath unconsciously. "That Lee sauce pork on Minzu Street. Sir, you have a good nose." Su Tong turned around, took out the sauce meat that he had prepared earlier, put it on the table, and took out 2 bottles of wine. The old man was stunned for a moment, looking up and down Su Tong's body. He didn't know where this kid had hidden the things, and why he didn't show any smell at all just now. In the blink of an eye, Su Tong had laid out the food and wine, and even prepared chopsticks for the old man. Now even a fool can understand that the old man came prepared. He looked at the smoking pole on the table, picked up the broken jade smoking pot on the ground with a pained expression, threw it on the table, and said angrily, "Say it, and don't beat around the bush." The smile on Su Tong's face faded. He took out the paper flower he made and presented it to the old man. "Look, I made this." The old man raised his eyebrows, took the paper flower in his hand, rubbed it with his fingers a few times, and then threw it on the table. "This is what your teacher taught you, take it back and practice for a few more years. It's no coincidence. My master is over 80 this year and will be naked for the rest of his life. Where can he find a master wife?" The old man originally reached out to pick up the wine on the table, but after hearing this, he put the glass down again. He looked at Su Tong with a sly smile and pointed at the yard. "Look at my yard, it's broken. All cats and dogs want to get in. It's broken, but no one has repaired it. If you like it, I can help you repair the yard." Seeing that he looked like he was indifferent, Old Man Song lost his temper and was about to drive the person out with a dark face. Su Tong suddenly covered his head and sat down on the ground. "Ouch, no, why don't you call 121st? I'll have a severe headache, ouch." The exaggerated acting skills are all written on his face. "If you don't agree, I will be in trouble." The corner of Old Man Song's mouth twitched a few times, and he suddenly felt that his life in the past 10 years had never been as ups and downs as it is today. "Zhongzhong's Hong, stop making trouble, get up first, and then talk after you get up." Old Man Song stretched out his hand to pull him up, drank a glass of wine to calm down, and then picked up the paper man on the table again. These are skills that are about to be eliminated. Why are you learning this at such a young age? I said I love it, do you believe it? Su Tong raised his head and looked at Old Man Song seriously. Letter, Old Man Song nodded. This paper flower was made in general, but it took a lot of effort to achieve it to this extent. But his voice changed, but this thing cannot be treated as a hobby. Paper making people have taboos about paper making people. I know that young people like you today like novelty, looking for excitement, and pursuing retro. But there are some things you don't understand, so don't come here join in the fun, otherwise you will only harm others and yourself. Old Man Song warned with sincerity, hoping that this boy would listen and stop entering this unknown business. He took a sip of wine and looked at the paper figures in the room, with a glimmer of water in his eyes, as if he was recalling that bad experience. I don't know if it was because his mood was really ups and downs today, which made Old Man Song a little unstable. He drank a few glasses of wine, and his face was full of melancholy. Su Tong sat aside and said nothing, waiting for Old Man Song to drink 4 or 5 more drinks, and his mood gradually stabilized before he spoke slowly. Old man, 100 years ago we didn't have cakes, and the West always laughed at us for not knowing what desserts are. Today, 100 years later, a young man named Zhou Yi, with the dough shaping skills passed down from our ancestors, resolutely I broke into the world of cakes and became recognized as the first person in the world's largest cake competition held in London, slapping those Westerners in the face. Su Tong's eyes were calm, but full of light. A craft should not be denied based on history. Carrying forward, inheriting, innovating, and taking a new path is the future. As he said that, he took out a piece of gold foil and put it in front of Old Man Song. Look, if we replace the paper with gold, wouldn't what we create be a work of art? Old Man Song was startled, took the gold foil in his hand, and couldn't help but ponder for a long time. Tick-tock tick. The hammers of the clock ticked in the dim room. It was pitch dark outside the yard, with the chirping of birds and the low calls of wild cats coming from time to time. I don't know how long it took, but I heard a boom, and the hour hand was already pointing at 9 o'clock. Go back. Old Man Song put down the gold foil in his hand. It's getting late, go back early. Hearing this, Su Tong's expression darkened, but he said nothing more and stood up to walk out. It was only when he walked to the door that he heard Old Man Song squinting his eyes and saying quietly, "Come early tomorrow and weed the yard. There is a house next door. You can move in first." Su Tong was really surprised this time. He looked back at Old Man Song and saw that he was smiling without saying a word, with his eyes narrowed. A smile finally appeared on his face. "Okay." After saying that, he trotted away, not forgetting to close the door for Old Man Song before leaving. Watching Su Tong leave, Old Man Song picked up his chopsticks, added some soy sauce meat, put it in his mouth and tasted it slowly. In the dark old house, the clock ticked. Except for Old Man Song, who was drinking, everything in the room seemed to be frozen there. It wasn't until he was over 30 after drinking that Old Man Song subconsciously picked up the cigarette rod at hand, crossed his legs, and looked at the relatives in the room. "Okay, look, our family has another descendant." After saying this, a cold wind blew through the house, and bursts of laughter could be heard coming from the house. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 20. Before dawn the next day, Su Tong had already gone home early. Old Man Song gave him the small house on the left, which gave him a place to stay in the city. During the past 2 days, Su Tong cleaned the yard during the day and began to learn the basic skills of paper tying under the guidance of Old Man Song at night. Others often need to practice these basic skills day after day to find the key, but with the help of the prop card paper craftsman's book, I can learn it easily. Often Old Man Song only needs to do it once for Su Tong, and Su Tong can easily master it after a few exercises and do it perfectly. This can't help but make Old Man Song have a new perspective on Su Tong's talent. But these are far from enough. The basics of paper making include not only techniques and skills, but also how to write and draw. Su Tong does not have the assistance of prop cards for this, so he can only learn it honestly. Fortunately, Old Man Song also had the patience to teach slowly. Although the two did not officially recognize each other's identities, the relationship between master and disciple was already tacit to each other. After dinner that night, Old Man Song took out 2 black and white photos from the box and gave them to Su Tong. He took it and took a look, and saw in the photo a group of people wearing official uniforms and pigtails, sitting neatly on horses. At first he didn't think there was anything wrong, but when he took a closer look, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and tilted his head to look at Mr. Song, who was sitting on the chair playing with the cigarette rod. Paper man. Seeing that Su Tong noticed it, Mr. Song nodded with a smile and pointed to the man wearing a torn cotton padded jacket in the lower left corner of the photo. "This is my master. When the Empress Dowager Cixi was about to die, my master went to make paper figures for Cixi. These were all made by my master. Remember, his old man's name is Shuigui." When Su Tong heard this and looked at the photo, he couldn't help but be in a trance. This skill simply crushed Old Man Li. This black and white photo has no color. If I hadn't seen Old Man Li's paper figures, I might not have been able to tell that those people riding tall horses were actually paper figures. Back then, my master was a famous paper maker. No one could find fault with anything he made. Mr. Song picked up the cigarette rod, put a handful of tobacco inside, sat on the chair and started smoking. While smoking, he talked about the past events when his master taught him to make origami figures, with pride on his face. As he spoke, Old Man Song stopped talking. When Su Tong looked up, he found that the old man had fallen asleep with his eyes squinted. If you listen carefully, you can hear snoring. He looked back at the clock and saw that it was already 11:20 at night, so he quietly took the old man's cigarette rod, found a blanket to cover him, turned off the lights and quietly exited the door. As soon as the door was closed, lights in the distance flickered in the dark night. When I looked up, I saw a huge light flashing on the building not far away. It was the sign of the Script Killing Experience Center. A new round of Script World is about to begin. Please go to the lobby to assemble this time. Attention, the actors are asked to assemble as soon as possible before the script starts. Those who exceed the time limit will have 10 script points deducted per minute. If the script points are not enough, they will be eliminated. Following the reminder sound in his ears, Su Tong curled his lips. As he had guessed, there was a penalty for being late. However, this punishment mechanism seems to be more lenient than I thought. It does not mean that there is no way for people to survive. As long as the script points are enough, there is still a chance of survival. After putting on some clothes, he quietly closed the door and walked towards the building. In fact, it's not that far. I remember there was a restaurant over there. It would take about 5 minutes to walk there. At 11 o'clock, the lights on the streets became dim, and there was not even a trace of a vehicle on the road. It seems that the closer you get to the building, the more the surrounding buildings begin to deteriorate. Even the trees on the street can't help but give people a ferocious and depressing feeling. The traffic lights on the road seem to always be red, like a silent warning, and those who watch feel panicked. Buzz. After gently pushing open the glass door, that familiar face came into view. The pale face is still sweet to the point of being cloying. After seeing Su Tong, the woman reminded her calmly, "You have half an hour to prepare. If there is nothing else, you can wait in the lobby for other players to arrive." After speaking, she did not forget to point to the sign hanging on the wall on the left. There is a line of small red letters written on the sign. it is forbidden to exchange any information about the script in the hall. Violators will be given a warning and 10 script points will be deducted. Su Tong nodded thoughtfully and walked past the woman while whistling slowly. Virtue. The woman rolled her eyes at him. After sitting down again for a moment, she raised her head again to confirm that Su Tong was really gone. She pouted and sat back on the chair with a bored expression. She bent down and took out a bag from the pocket under the chair. The iron box is placed on the table. At this moment, her eyes suddenly froze, and she saw an origami crane appearing on the table. Picking up the paper crane, the woman glanced outside the bar and pouted, "Stingy." But after saying that, I still dug out a glass bottle filled with eyeballs from the drawer cabinet, threw the eyeballs inside into the trash can, and threw the paper crane in my hand into the bottle to admire it. After looking at it for a while, maybe she thought it was good, so she put the bottle in front of her, opened the iron box on the table, looked at the delicious food in the box, and started licking her slender tongue along her lips. Not long after, I heard a low gnawing sound coming from under the bar. In the hall on the other side, Su Tong found that he was not the first one to arrive. A young man was sitting opposite him. The two looked at each other. After examining each other, they felt familiar with each other. Like Zhou Yu, he is not a novice. Mourn the dog. The young man squinted his eyelids and raised the teacup in his hand with a smile. Su Tong sat opposite the young man, picked up the magazine he had not finished reading before, and said calmly, "Doctor." After the two of them revealed their identities to each other, dead silence gradually returned to the empty hall. But before long, as the sound of footsteps came, 3 more people came one after another. The 3 men were very different in age. The younger one looked like he was only 17 or 18 years old, and the oldest one looked like he was old enough to be a father to the other 2. But despite their age, Su Tong and Sangha couldn't help but look at each other. This man was wearing a military green vest, showing off his exaggerated muscles. Sitting on the sofa felt as if the entire sofa was tilted towards him. As for the one in the middle, he was about the same age as him. He held his headphones and sat down on the sofa, then closed his eyes and looked like he was recharging his energy. The 3 of them had no intention of introducing themselves, and they had no intention of asking Su Tong and Sangho their names. The arrogance and confidence in their behavior were enough to show that in their hearts, Su Tong and Sangho were completely inferior characters, not worth mentioning at all. Buzz, Kakaka. The red light illuminated from one side of the hall, and everyone looked sideways, still wearing the familiar cheongsam. The only difference is that today's cheongsam has been replaced by dark purple. This adds a bit of mature woman's temperament to the host's already graceful figure, like a ripe apple, exuding an alluring fragrance. "Welcome to this script-killing game, please come with me." The paper fan covered her face, and the seductive voice made people feel a tingling sensation in their bones. The mourning dog on the sofa nearby couldn't help but lick his tongue. Unfortunately, before Sangha could get up, 2 figures had already walked into the corridor leading to the game area one step ahead of him. What was even more irritating was the strong man who was as big as a mountain. He leaned directly over and squeezed away the mourning dog following behind. The mountain-like body blocked the corridor tightly, leaving not even a crack for the 2 of them. Damn it, the mourning dog did not dare to say anything, but in his heart he had already begun to greet the strong man's family. Su Tong didn't care, and followed behind slowly, occasionally admiring the stills in the corridor. As he looked at it, he paused and saw a familiar still. Sitting on a coffin was a man and a woman. Aren't they Zhou Yu and Wang Xiaowai who participated in the game with him last time? Do you know me? Seeing that he didn't leave, Manga looked back at the photo. Those who died in the script will leave a photo here. This is their ending and the only thing left after they die. Looking at the photo wall in this corridor, Sangha couldn't help but take a long breath. Every photo was the ending of a player. Every time I walk by here, I get chills. I always worry that after this visit, the next time the people on the photo wall will have another photo of themselves. Just when he was feeling deeply worried, Su Tong's voice came to his ears, "How ugly." Sanggu was stunned, then looked back at Su Tong, only to see him making a few gestures on the photo, and said with a look of disgust, "Can't we refer to the style of Hong Kong movies? This photographer must be a single guy. He takes such ugly pictures. He definitely doesn't have a girlfriend." Su Tong turned around and said to Sanggu seriously. The corner of Sanggu's mouth twitched a few times. At this time, the host was already standing at the door of the room and said, "Please come in as soon as possible. The game is about to begin." The two of them looked back and saw that the three people who were walking in front had already chosen a room and walked in. Seeing this, the two of them could only drop the topic and quickly walk to the door. Three of them have been selected, leaving only 2 rooms on the left and right that have not been selected. Su Tong looked to the left and was about to walk up when Sanggu suddenly said, "Be careful, they are a team, and they are stronger than us. It is best not to follow them after entering the script world." "Why, isn't it uncomfortable to hold your thigh?" Su Tong put his hands in his pockets and asked with a carefree expression. Sanggu frowned, "I advise you to give up this idea. The team's gameplay is different from ours. They can be more radical than us, and they can exchange information and scripts with each other, and even." Sanggu didn't continue talking at this point, but just looked at him coldly. "Anyway, just take care of yourself." After saying that, the morning dog opened the door next to him and stepped in. Looking at the morning dog disappearing through the door, Su Tong couldn't help but narrowed his eyelids. At this moment, the host in front of him walked up behind him without knowing it. He lightly covered his face with his fan and whispered in Su Tong's ear, "Handsome guy, I'm giving you a friendly reminder, be careful of the ghost behind you." After saying that, the woman pushed forward. The huge force did not allow him to resist at all, and her body was pushed directly into the door. Boom! With the sound of the door closing, the eyes suddenly fell into a suffocating darkness. Suddenly, a little light flickered in the dark room. He looked carefully and saw a bright light that seemed to be shining from a very far away place. And the light is getting closer and closer to the careful side. Looking at the approaching lights, he squinted his eyes and took a closer look. Woo! A vague outline in the darkness gradually became clear under the light. Looking at the huge thing that suddenly appeared in front of him, Su Tong squinted his eyes, silently took out a non-existent cigarette from his arms, and took a deep breath into the air. It's finished." The moment he finished speaking, a huge train quickly pierced through the darkness. "The first volume is finished, and the second volume is about to begin. I will update it temporarily today, and I will review the story of the new copy.